I haven't had alcohol in a while, man. Good for me. Good for me. Good for me. Well, yeah. The A lot of people when they talk about World War III, they always think of the Iran versus the United States. Who is pissing the other person's Cheerios the most? We killed one of their generals. They've had a long history of killing United States citizens through either acts of terrorism or funding acts of terrorism. So which one of them is the bigger aggressor? Who's really at fault, and what's the likelihood they're going to start an aggressive offensive war against one another? Um, I don't really look at it the same way. I always look at it what's the cost benefit analysis of going to war with somebody else, especially with a country. You look at the cost of Afghanistan. It cost us, I think the Pentagon papers that just got released, we wasted over $1 trillion on a war that really did nothing, even though they knew full well that we should have gotten out a long, long time ago. And the quagmire that we ended up being in was absolutely of no use. It didn't really benefit us or the country itself. It was basically just stealing money and destroying our economy, or at least detrimenting the economy. So when I talk about like the economic cost benefit analysis, it doesn't always just come down to money. And a lot of people confuse economics with the currency like the Iranian rial or the American dollar and the ability for our economy to go up and down, our stocks. But that's not really what I'm talking about. It's always what the person values. And that's what the study of economics really is. It's the it's the study of the distribution of resources. And that's what this really comes down to is what do we value more than currency? Because let's be fair, as the United States, we have cash to burn. If, of any country in the world, we have the cash to burn to just go on any war that we see fit and not really blink an eye at the cost. On the other hand, what do we value more? And so far, what I see America really having a really vie for and value of is control. We have an absolute necessity to be in control of one thing or another. And a lot of times it comes down to regional ability for position of bases. It's the reason we've stayed in Iraq and Afghanistan for so long is not because we want to continuously hunt tiny little cells of terrorists. It's because we have these gigantic jumping off points that are major in any kind of conflict that may arise. Yes, we have economic, as in like currency and benefit from being able to have lower have lower costs when it comes to crude oil or kind of negotiating power when it comes to certain foreign governments, being able to control what we see in like large public marketplaces. But overall, we really value control. And when it comes to Iran, that's the one big chunk of the Middle East that we have really zero influence in. Pretty much anything we do, it's basically the X that we've pissed off way too much, and they just, oh, this will help you in any capacity. Good. Let me do the not only no, but the exact opposite. So it's one of those kind of fights, and that's what I see where the economic benefit for us is finally being able to rein in control. But the thing is, we don't really have a necessity to. They're pretty locked in their place. Iran doesn't really serve a threat, even though they're the 16th largest military on the planet. They don't really see any kind of ability to go outside of their country. We are a global. Yeah. Because the Ivy League kind of spans outside of just the Ivy League that we see in the United States. It kind of goes into the spheres of like Oxford over in Britain, things like that. So yeah, so even outside of the standard what we see in the United States is the Ivy League, like Brown and Harvard and Yale and those. I mean, outside of that, we that sphere of influence in the international community, there were very specific schools that they learned from, and yeah, pretty. I believe there's a video I actually recommend you see. I think you would love this of all people. There's a video of an interview that Boris Johnson just had, and he started reciting the Iliad in Greek from memory. Yeah. Yeah. Trust me, you would love it, and I'll see if I can find the link for it. But I mean, and you're right, but and that's why we look at when it comes down to like in the international economics community, we look at things like why the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund in the United States and what we call, I believe, SWIFT. It's the SWIFT program. It's basically the ability. It's the apparatus that we utilize to transfer money from country to country internationally, and that's run by the United States and the International Monetary Fund. Uh, and the only people who are really outside of it is people part of the economic union of BRICS, and that's it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, um, and South Africa. There we go. I remembered. So I mean, like those specific economic unions, um, primarily, obviously, like Russia and China are like the big heavy hitters, with Brazil coming up in the rear in third. But India is growing really quickly as well, and South Africa, after the most recent issues, is probably going to go down the hill. But that's what you're kind of talking about, is that China and Russia are kind of off on their own, and then everybody else is kind of sided with the international fund or the international grouping of the United States and what we have essentially created as the natural hegemonic powers of the contemporary world. So, and when it comes back to Iran, they're kind of like the redheaded stepchild of all of this. Nobody really accepts them. Like the only real trading partners they have right now is China. And in fact, when you look at their economics, and this is why I don't think we're going to be engaging in World War III with Iran anytime soon, is because the loss of Soleimani, the general that we ended up killing in Iraq, the loss of him is significantly less than actually going to war with the United States. There's nothing really of economic value in doing so. Not only the destruction of their regime, the Ayatollah would obviously get killed, the loss of their power, and the entire loss of their control over their own state. The Iranian Revolution is now an Islamic state. It's run by a theological kind of dictatorship, and the theocracy that they run is very top down. It's actually one of the only, it's the largest modern command economy on the planet. Yeah. Yeah, now he is the most supreme leaders of the entire world. Pretty much, you have yeah the 11 carriers throughout the planet, and pretty much any kind of power that goes against the United States, we can just reach out and touch someone with a couple nukes on a sub that nobody else can actually track. So good luck on them. But so going back to Iran, because I've really been looking into this, and it really interested me of how like the way that the Iranian economy is structured. A lot of people know the United States. They know the economics of the United States. They know how everything works. I think I've been on here actually before stating that I actually classify us as an oligarchical corporatism rather than a capitalist country. Um, yeah, it not really. I mean, we still have the economic mobility somewhat, but it's being generally restricted, even with measurements of the Gini coefficient, where our income inequality is starting to separate. Uh, but although I will temper one issue is I personally think I think the world is going in a good direction. I really do. Everybody's looking at like fire, brimstone. Oh, the world's going to hell. Not really. Everything is going pretty well. You know, a lot of people are dying a lot later. The economies of the entire world are going up. Like a lot of things that are historical. Well, I don't classify myself an economist. I just have a really, I just study economics. I love economics, and it's one of my passions. And when it comes down to war itself, yeah, I have a degree in economics, but I don't consider myself an economist. But yeah, when it comes, it's a really kind of interesting aspect looking at like the United States culture. We have a very warmongering kind of tone. We I think we go to war on average once every like 18 years, and we've been at this war for the last almost pretty much 18 years. Uh, and yet we still have this kind of weird culture where it's seen as not only honorable, but it's also desirable to go into the military, to follow in the lines and steps of your father, and do all these kind of things. So having a sorry about the background noise, but the value to go to war, yeah, I understand that there's this not necessarily the economic reign of control, but also the economic benefits in your like economy. But maybe it's also the fact of uh, having the ability to actually show and present your ability to go to war as a kind of deterrent. And yeah, well, the Japanese used to use that as a huge factor of theirs, which is if you haven't gone to war, I know this in the Marine Corps at least, is when you if you go into the Marine Corps for like in the infantry and you don't end up deploying, there's a vast difference between you and the people who have. And it's yeah, the pokes, yeah. It's a really weird kind of mindset is even people who have not gone who have been there but didn't go outside of the wire compared to the people who haven't, or the people who have versus the people who haven't, like there's still this kind of weird division between the two of them. And the even and it's kind of a weird conundrum because a lot of us in the Marine Corps like we don't see a value in what we did. Like there's not a lot of value in Afghanistan and Iraq, and a lot of people value it. I actually have a buddy of mine. His name is Luis Madrid, and he was over in Afghanistan for a while. And when the idea of coming up to Iran and going to war with Iran came up, he literally just the very first thing, we shouldn't have been in Afghanistan. We shouldn't have been in Iraq. There was no reason for us to be there. Why in the hell are we even thinking of going back for Iran? This is absolutely nonsense and absolutely blasphemous for people who have a mindset of what is good for the United States or people who are genuinely patriotic. Why are we sending our sons to die for something that is absolutely no benefit to us? So it's month. Yeah. Well, I'm not even going to try to tackle because I don't think I've put enough thought into it in the economic. The one of few things that I haven't put a lot of economic thought into. um, but I think you're right. If I were to put it in kind of a simple context, it is it's the fruition of words. And I think, especially in the United States, I remember when I was really young, we used to tell people like, "Yeah, I would take a bullet for you, man." Like a lot of our friends that we like, yeah, but the vast majority of people like we have no clue, and it's not a matter of how much you care about a person. It really isn't. It doesn't come down to, "Hey, I really like this guy. Hey, this guy's a really good buddy of mine. I'm going to do this." I think it's genuinely when your attitude towards a person shifts, not because of your appreciation for what they did for you, but it's actually the realization of the level of honor that they hold above all else. They are willing to put their life on the line, and they've shown that in tangible results. They've fought beside you. They've been injured for you. They've tried to help you. They've done everything in a necessary manner to show you that they respect and honor you enough to fight beside you, not only for themselves but also for you. And that kind of tangible respect, that's what the shift is. It's not like a huge chunk of the people that I was with in the Marine Corps. I absolutely cannot stand them. They're fucking assholes. Sorry for the language. They're the like some of them are just the worst people I've ever met. By far, like the worst human being. I remember one time I went back to my barracks. This dude who just didn't like me ended up crunching up a whole bunch of Pop Tarts and chips and urinated all over my bed and just poured it all over. I was not his friend. And then and yet and yet when it came down to it, he was there. So he was a prick. I don't like him, and I laugh whenever he stubs his toe. May he live forever, and may his rum never be refilled. But overall, there is still an odd kind of respect that I don't have to like you, but I do respect you. And that kind of mentality on another person, because you know what they will do for you, the extent of what they will do for you, regardless of what they think about you or how much they care about you, is something that not a lot of people will understand. And it's not necessarily a brotherhood. It's a matter. I think it goes beyond a brotherhood. It's because a brotherhood kind of goes down to like this "I like you" kind of mindset. It is what will you do when your feet are put to the fire, and we've seen what you will do, and that's why the people who end up like cowering in the corner doing nothing, like those are the ones that we don't really even put in kind of retrospect in our platoons. Like we kind of ignore them, we shit talk them because you weren't you weren't really one of us. Great movie, Shia LaBeouf's best movie. Oh, yeah. Yeah, probably it again. One of Shia LaBeouf's best movies. It's God, what's his name? Ed Hardy. Tom Hardy. Thank you. So one of his best, I would actually say one of his best performances as well. If you don't know who Tom Hardy is, he was also Bane. So again, one of the best. But but you're right. They're coming from a person where like the idea of brotherhood when it like my biological brother, like he and I don't really get along all that well. He's been there for me in like specific circumstances, which was great, but for the vast majority of things, like he and I don't really have an inherent trust towards each other. Of are we like can I count on him in those big times? And I've never had a circumstance where that tangible result has actually been there. So the idea of like the Tom Hardy kind of lawless brotherhood, yeah, it would be a very odd kind of concept for me to even comprehend. Where I see people like a buddy of mine, Jared Hallman, and then Luis Madrid and a couple others. Where yeah, I'll do damn near anything for them because I know they'll do the same for me, if not more. Yeah, yeah. So do you think that there is a purpose for war then in the building of the communal bond? Because we are rather locked away from the rest of the world in regard to two very large oceans that really divide us from the rest of the world. Okay? And so there's not really an inherent risk of somebody coming to invade the United States. I think it was Admiral Yamamoto back in 1944, 1941, something like that, even said we should never invade the American homeland. There would be a rifle behind a blade of grass. So the likelihood that we're ever going to be invaded is pretty much zero. On the other hand, we do tend to go to war a lot. So do you think that there is an inherent value? Obviously, I think you and I would both agree that there is one, but do you think that might be a precursor as a reason to go to war is to foster a community, a very large community between the United States? Because in the veteran community, it doesn't matter if you're from Florida, it doesn't matter if you're from New York or California or from Washington. If you're a veteran, we pretty much see each other like, oh, veteran, what's up, man? And you're good to go. Is that a way for the United States to foster the community of the United States since we're so freaking big? There's not really an ability that connect, or there's nothing in culture that really spans New York to Washington State. Like everybody from Washington State, you look at New York and you, besides being liberal, we think they're a whole bunch of pricks. I, but that goes back to the entire reason why I don't think that we're going to be going to war anytime soon with Iran. Is what you're talking about is economics. Economics. So it's the reason to go to war is to raid, to get property, to harass your neighbors and get something out of it. But there was a big turning point. Yeah, sure, but I think it was completely secondary to why we went to war in the first place, which was to get is to get the loot. Yeah. But what changed in the 20th century was we found out that trade was more valuable than war, and that it was more costly to go to war for the ROI, the return on investment wasn't worth it. Yeah, we could go over and raid a country and have them pay tribute to us for a while, but we could gain significantly more economically by trading with one another, which is why we see kind of the modern iteration, which is trade wars. Right now, we're in a trade war with China. We've been in a trade war with Iran. We've been in a trade war with North Korea. Been in a trade war with Russia. All of our wars currently, outside of Afghanistan and Iraq, for the last almost 40 years, has been trade wars. Even arguably, the Cold War was simply a trade war with Russia. That's primarily what we did. We pretty much put up a blockade, and then we just basically created our own diverse areas of trade. The international community, which is the contemporary hegemonic powers with the United States and the West, created their own and were more successful due to the market economy comparatively to the command economy of the USSR. And now, what do we see with Iran? We see that I've measured the United States as an oligarchical corporatism, but like ostensibly, Iran is the same thing, but not a market economy version of it. Because I don't know if you know anything about the Iranian banyads, but do you know any? Yeah, no. It's think of the Salvation Army if it was also government run, seen as a charity, religious as well as charity. Like think of basically the banyads are a religious and it's seen as members of the religious Islamic ideology. Like it's part of the church. It has the religious overtone, but it's also part of the government. It's directly overseen by the Ayatollah, and it also runs charities, but it's also a corporation. So like they don't have to have basically it's a nonprofit organization run by the government, which sends out people just like the Salvation Army requesting donations from foreign countries and donations from their own people, and yet it's a corporation that doesn't have to pay taxes, owns 20% of the entire Iranian economy, and has almost dictation over what kind of benefits that they have versus detriments that they have. So that's why their economy is kind of in the tank. It's because the banyads have almost authority over every single reach of the economy with impunity. They don't have to pay taxes. They don't even have to submit the same kind of tax approval status that other companies do. So why would you have what is the purpose of investing in Iran, even without sanctions from the United States? What's the purpose when somebody else from one of the Banyad corporations, can just simply come in and start competing against you with no taxes, direct intervention on the behalf of the Banyad from the Ayatollah himself? Like there's really no purpose in investing in Iran, and therefore there's no real reason in the end to go to war with Iran or to war with the United States. The Banyads would lose out, the Ayatollah would lose out, everybody in their right mind would lose out in Iran. And so what's the purpose of that other than launching a couple missiles, intentionally missing the United States targets and doing nothing? It showed their power. It showed that they're, hey, look at me, you're going to back off. And that was it. That was the end. And so now that we've seen what happened, we can literally kill their generals. And economically speaking, even though they are separated from the rest of the international community, it all comes down to a command versus market economy. We have our market economy, they have a command economy, and just like the modern iteration of any war, it's going to come down to a trade war, and we already won that in spades. But that's an idea of having a respect and admiration and honor for your enemy that we don't really recognize in the United States anymore. We don't have an enemy that we simply admire or respect anymore. I know that the Japanese used to. I know the Greeks used to. I know the Spartans did, and a lot of people have time. So is I would say that there's a little bit of near spirituality in what you're talking about. Um, I, re- I think that we on a spiritual level desire the similar kind of contact. I mean, we have. Let me. The reason I'm thinking about this, the second you were describing that piece in the Iliad, is the second it started reminding me of a movie actually, and not just because of like cinematography, but actually, who made the Lord of the Rings? Um, Yes. No, not. Um, started with Peters. Who made the Lord of the Rings? I can't remember his name. Peter Jackson. Uh, so Peter Jackson, um, he actually made a movie recently about World War One, and it's called They Will Not Grow Old. And a lot of that is what. Oh, oh, yeah, but the movie it's kind of like a almost a documentary-ish kind of movie. It's made by the guy who made Lord of the Rings, who's an epic filmmaker, but it's almost a documentary. It's a colorized version of a lot of the filming that took place in World War One, and it's showing a lot of the similar what they're talking about is these Germans who were just running about from the British. This guy right here, he was actually recorded as a potter. He was a shopkeep. He owned a store back home, and his shop is never going to open again because he was killed in combat against the British in this battlefield. And they're showing pictures of the dead, and then while they were living, like they have recorded video of them alive, and then shots and stills of them after they've been killed. So it's a very visceral kind of experience when you're looking at these people, seeing how they were before, and then what ended up being of them afterwards. And yeah, there's kind of this spiritual context that we have that we want to create this. There has to be loss. There has to be those among us who sacrifice for our community and for our culture, and we respect them, and we live on and build our community in their memory. That's why I kind of brought up that earlier part, which is maybe going to war for the United States at least is a way to actually bring about cohesion between such a large area, because there's no real way to commingle the amount of cultures that we have in the United States except through the shared loss and the shared honor that we had with those who have fallen or those who have fought. Uh, yeah. And you see, and that just thinking about those kind of mind, just thinking about that kind of mindset is why. What would it take for us to have cohesion again? I don't think like people on a regular basis, people like you and myself, or people that we would randomly encounter out on the street. I don't think we're divided. I really don't. I don't think we are a divided people. I think that the loudest minority of us, who are the kind of screeching leftists or the annoying alt-righters, they those are the ones who are trying to stoke division. But you have the one thing that's really starting to divide America, and we're all starting to agree that it's trash, and that's the media. Yeah, it's so what you were just talking about. It really hit on something. So recently, I had a conversation with somebody who's been extremely influential in my life, hugely positive force. Um, there was a recent invitation for me to go see a concert together, or like there's an opportunity to go to a concert together. And traditionally, like I've been one of the people who have been invited for these kind of events with this person. Um, and when we brought it up, said, "Hey, is this something you would want me to go to?" And the response was unequivocally, "It's like actually no." And they were really worried at first of like, it's like, "Hey, take this in the most positive sense, but I don't want you to go." And the reason for it is because I have a lot of those memories with you. I would like to build more of these similar memories with others who are also in my friend group, also within my community, and trying to spread that kind of community and commitment and kind of loyalty with others as well, not just a singular focused person, trying to genuinely build that community, doing not just something with somebody that you like, that one person that you really want to go with, but also doing the opportunity and sacrificing something with the one person you probably want, like even admit, yeah, I would love to go with you, but I really want to build more memories with a lot of people, like the people who are already in my friend group, like they're here, and I want to bring them up, and I want to bring those kind of relationships to the forefront, and I want to have build more memories with those people. And these are kind of catalyst events that you can really call upon way down the line, way down the road of, hey, do you remember when we did this together? And we don't do that anymore. We don't really build memories. We don't really build things with people. We've given up those communities, and we kind of stay so singularly focused that it starts to sacrifice with everybody else. It's one thing for a husband and wife. That's a completely different aspect. But when you are trying to build a community of people, whether it be in the brotherlyhood of the military or whether it be outside of that context, you and I have kind of diverse friend groups. And bringing those people out of the kind of singularly focused ideas and fleshing them out as people kind of builds a more well-rounded mentality with them and a better long-lasting relationship, because you see them outside of just the singularly focused issue that you're kind of talking to them. Like the one reason you became friends in the first place. You and I became friends because of our combativeness towards like Antifa and things like that. And when we started to explore yours and my friendship outside of like even combativeness on topics, we don't agree on everything. In fact, there's quite a few things that you and I have disagreed upon, and it's still that kind of respect towards one another's opinions that's based on, one, rationality, two, respect on the other person's intelligence and the idea that they know what the hell they're talking about, and the place they're coming from is simply different than my own. But as we've started to flesh each other out as, yeah, I'm an economics nerd, but I'm also a political nerd, and there's a whole bunch of things in my life that really affect the way I act and the way I speak and the way I think. While you are affected by the exact same thing, while you share something or have something that's way outside of my realms, you're about to become a father Mark II. So these are things where I've gotten to grow to know not only your wife, but now I've gotten to see your family. I've gotten to see those kind of things flesh out as a human outside of the original things that you and I met over. And that's what it means to start building a community, is that they are actually genuinely fleshed out human beings that you start to build that camaraderie and that trust and loyalty with. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It starts to swing. I mean, I think it's an embracing of things that are. I use my left hand, but it's in a sling. Um, things that what the traditional population would see is kind of a, if I'm looking at a scale of 1 to 10, you'll feel it between a 4 and a 6, maybe a 7, when you really love your partner, that 7 kind of feeling. But then you start to have those extreme connections with people when you face that kind of like disgust towards your enemy because you've seen what they've done, or kind of like the Japanese had for us, where they would see us surrender, and that's seen as horribly dishonorable. It's like it's better to die in combat rather than to surrender. And having an honorable disposition towards your enemy, because that is a form of respect. Because to see and fight your enemy on the battlefield, knowing that they are fighting for their cause the same as you are, there is a general respect and an honor to that. But when you see that they don't do that, it swings to the exact opposite direction. And there are a lot of reasons why we treat our POWs so well. It's because we have a lot of respect for our enemies. It's the reason that we normally treated the Germans and a lot of other people, rather well. It's because we have a respect for them. Um, yeah, we don't have a lot of respect for them at all. It's when you watch them do what they do, in lines to how they treat women, how they treat people who think children, how they believe differently than them. Or like, I remember over in Africa, like they'll literally set gay people on fire with kerosene. So it's just, you're suspected of being gay, they'll either hack you right there, or they'll literally just set you on fire in the middle of the town square. It's not a big thing to them. They don't care. It's acceptable, and it's actually encouraged in the community. So when we have a lack of respect for our enemy, that is what is putting forward a lot of, hey, you know what we should do? We should go to war. We should really do this. It's because we don't have a respect for them. We want to see them lose. We want to see them suffer. It's why the idea of glassing the Middle East is such a you know pushed up joke in the military, because we don't have respect for them. Yeah, I mean, it's a fruitless, it's a fruitless endeavor. I've been trying to encourage it more and more in any of the kind of people that I still converse with. I didn't want political violence in my city. We pushed them out of Seattle. They stopped really doing much in Seattle except for having maybe three, four, five people, and that's it. And so they're not really a presence in Seattle anymore. And they all went down to Portland. So we accomplished our goal. My goal was not to be like a consistent or what is a professional protester. That was never my aim. It's I don't support political violence in my city. That's what I took a stand against. We succeeded. It went away. End of my protesting. Uh, it was a very specific goal, but I don't see Antifa as anything of respect. It's because they don't even know where they lie on issues. They don't understand the positions they take. And when you talk to them, it's pretty evident that they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't even understand their own positions. Where comparatively, like you and I, when we want to go into something, we may talk to somebody more as a soundboard, but more often than not, we're trying to get somebody to like argue against us because we want to see the flaws in our position. Because without somebody in opposition, I don't know what I think. It's kind of the yes, our exactly our enemies define. It's like yeah, yeah, and that's been a major component of I've never hidden myself. I know I can't remember whether or not you did. Did you hide yourself under a pseudonym once? No. So it's because I've never hidden myself, my face, my name. I've been doxxed like dozens of times. I think you even met me during that time. It's like, hey, by the way, I know exactly who you are. I'm like, um, I was probably one of the most doxxed people for a while. Um, at least at least here in the like the Seattle area, it was starting to get annoying. But the thing is, I never hid it. It was never really a secret because I believe in the words that I'm saying. I don't believe in political violence in my city. You and I have over the merits of the alt right before. I've even told. I think one of the things I've said on dozens of occasions is I'm not alt right, but by the way that they're measuring the alt right, I probably soon will be considered. Even though I vehemently disagree with what the alt right stands for, I'm not an ethno nationalist, and you and I have argued about that before. It's but overwhelmingly there is a belief in genuineness to what I say, and if I may not be attached to 100% of everything I say because yes, certain things I'm still exploring. Yeah. I'm actually pretty appreciative over Charlottesville. Awkwardly enough, I mean, I think it kind of drew that line in the sand of like, and now we know who it is. Cool, thanks. It did rob us of something valuable. And and that's where we return back to kind of square one. We're looking at a deeply divided Congress in this weird kind of we're going to impeach Trump, we're going to go to war, we're going to do a lot of these things. And then you have kind of odd ones out like Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard, who are probably the most popular in the entire Democratic field, or at least the most people who actually like them are the most dedicated to like actually exploring these kind of thoughts comparatively to just the vast majority of people who are like, I guess I'll go Democrat. Is it between Bernie or is it between Warren? Um, and then everybody who actually puts a lot of thought into this, they tend to gravitate towards like Yang or Gabbard, and those are the ones that are really kind of pushing forward of like, hey, we should probably get out of these, these kind of boondoggles of war, and yet they are more along the lines of anti-war, pro pro economics and pro freedom and like kind of the traditional America. That, that's actually why I predict. Feel free to count this as one of my official predictions. Is that AOC is probably going to lose her seat this election, and it's because she's a crowdfunder, so she gets the vast majority of her funds from national, but the only ability for her to get into office is from her district. So the likelihood she's probably going to get kicked out of office because people don't like her in her own district. She cares more about the opinions of people who live in other areas than she does about the people in her own district, in which case she's probably going to lose out. Um, yeah, she's going for a presidential strategy on a representative voting ticket, so it doesn't really work out in the same lines. But in the end, we as a people, it's we kind of spoke of it before. It's really hard for us to build a community with 330 billion people, and yet there is some kind of shared community bond between us of being American. A lot of it, and this is why I argued so often with the alt right, is I think when I kind of had like a little sparring session with Greg Johnson when I spoke with him. It's like I've met people who are African American and Hispanic who are in the military with me or who are way more American than some of the white people I've met. How can you really rest upon the idea that being American is a white value? That's nonsensical. And I think you were even there when I said that. Um, Holding said thought. So just for anybody who is actually listening, I actually ended up going to kind of see the perspective of one of the alt-right leaders here in Washington State, and I vehemently disagreed with him because a lot of what he was saying is that being a United States citizen or a being American, being Washingtonian, so on and so forth, was a lot of it had to come down to being European in nature. And I wholeheartedly disagreed with him because I've met too many people who are in the military, who are either African American, Black, Hispanic, so on and so forth, who were, I would say, more American than some people who are white that I've met. Some people who I would consider that an African American or Hispanic who is loving of American values and kind of lessons that we all grew up with about freedom and liberty and kind of ability to move on is significantly better than somebody who is white and who just simply, I would say, is a communist. I was talking for the camera. Kind of bringing up the entire idea of how I had an interaction with Greg Johnson. Yeah, it's again, I think I've been arguing this point for as long as I've known you. I would much rather have somebody who is, you know, black or African American or Hispanic beside me in the military or anything like that than a communist who's white. And just being next to me, I agree. I would much rather a person who shares my values. Yeah, yeah. I think that's why they're extremists. Like fundamentalists. Yeah. I So I don't have a problem condemning extremism because traditionally when I look at extremism, it normally comes to this is what I believe, and I will exert it on others even to the point of violence. And that's where I normally have a problem, and that's why I normally put extremism into a camp of, yeah, I'm not a fan, um, because I Yes, and I know that you've alliterated that quite a bit in defense of hatred, but that's why the vast majority of the world looks at the United States and considers us all extremists, and it's because it's because we see liberty, we see freedom, we see kind of the values of the American way, and we will defend it even to the point of violence. We would much rather shoot you in the face than fall under an authoritarian regime. We will not let it happen. I believe Virginia currently is in a state of emergency simply because militias threaten to overtake the Capitol because of recent gun legislation. So we would much rather, even with the Clive and Bundy situation down in the state of, I think it's Oregon, right? Yeah. So Clive and Bundy actually was put up under federal prosecution charges for uh, treason and murder of federal agents and a whole bunch of things because he had a genuine standoff with federal authorities because of taxation laws that he was being, you know, charged because of just simply he had had a family farm for hundreds of years or many generations, or not hundreds of years, generations under his family, and instead he's like, no, I'm not going to pay these. These are absolutely ridiculous. And if you try to come onto my property, I will kill you. And he saw an authoritarian regime starting to push its boundaries, which was the United States government. He fought back literally, killed a couple federal agents, had one of his own people die, and they were willing to fight and kill and die for that belief in the lack of tyranny and the liberty and the freedom that we established as the American way. And sure enough, he went into court, you know what the court said? We agree. The government overstepped. Absolutely. And he was found innocent of all charges for murder because of he stood his ground. We would much rather shoot you in the face than fall under tyranny, and that's why the vast majority of the world normally considers us extremists. And so when we look at extremists in the United States, like that's kind of Golden Dawn level, like. So, yeah. So I unfortunately have to start wrapping up. It's pretty much time for my medication due to the fact that kill me. Um, so it always goes into broader categories that we have to start digging into and exploring. Thanks, Chris. Talk to you later, man.